check this out. Look how thin this keyboard is. It's pretty insane. This is the K100 Air Wireless from Corsair. There seems to be a trend of ultra thin, low profile gaming keyboards emerging, with the likes of this and the Deathstalker V2 following in the footsteps of boards like the Logitech G915. But I want to start this video with a bit of a question to you all. How much is too much for a keyboard? Hey guys, I'm Matt and welcome to Kit Guru. This time around I'm checking out and giving you my thoughts on the brand spanking new Corsair K100 Air Wireless keyboard. This board is the latest to be added to Corsair's extensive lineup, and if you rank them on price it sits firmly at the top. The K100 Air Wireless has an eye-watering recommended retail price of 280 quid. 280 quid. Now you see why I asked you how much is too much. With a price this high, there's no room for error. This keyboard has to deliver quality in every department. Now on paper, the K100 Air has almost everything you could want from a keyboard, and it will certainly appeal to any Corsair superfans out there. But does it live up to its very hefty price tag? Let's have a look, shall we? So let's start off, as we usually do, with the unboxing. Now straight off the bat, I'm not going to lie, I expected a very, very premium unboxing experience and packaging and stuff from this keyboard, and I'd love to have told you that that's the case, but it just isn't. The K100 Air comes in a standard box with nothing in it apart from the keyboard, a USB cable and some documentation. To be fair, the board is protected quite well by a plastic cover, so you shouldn't have to worry about it getting damaged while it's in the box. I'd really liked to have seen something included to sweeten the deal though. Keycaps aren't an option, which we'll talk about later in the video, but at least something like accessories to help with cleaning the board, a keyboard brush or a cleaning cloth for example, or maybe an ultra thin low profile wrist rest. Overall, the unboxing and included accessories were a bit disappointing. One thing that is most definitely not disappointing though is the design of this keyboard. Now I appreciate that our opinions on design may differ a little bit, and reviewing the design of a product is a very subjective thing, but in my opinion this keyboard is absolutely stunning. It's finished in brushed aluminium and is just 17mm thick. It's thinner than my phone towards the bottom edge. I think it looks really great in the video, but in person it just looks even better. It's probably the sleekest, most modern looking keyboard I've ever seen. This is the sort of keyboard that they're rocking in the year 2099. That's not to say it's going to be to everybody's taste though. Some people will just prefer a more traditional style of keyboard, but I think we should all be able to agree that Corsair have come up with quite a striking design for the K100 Air Wireless. As it's a full-size board, it has quite a large footprint when sitting on a desk. It sits at 437mm wide and 156mm deep. Along the top there are dedicated buttons for switching profiles, adjusting brightness, turning Windows lock on and off and controlling media playback. There's also a scroll wheel which by default will adjust the volume on your PC. But all of the buttons that I just mentioned, along with almost every other key, can be reprogrammed in iCUE, which we'll look at in more depth in the software section of the video later on. Sitting front and centre at the top of the board is a really shiny plastic section that houses all of the LED indicator lights. This is how the board will let you know the statuses for connectivity, wireless encryption, battery levels, macro mode, along with the usual caps lock, scroll lock, num lock and Windows lock statuses. This shiny bit of plastic is a serious fingerprint magnet and it scratches very easily. So keep a microfiber cloth close to hand and be very careful if you want it to stay looking pristine and not end up looking like the one on the board that I've got for review. The keys on the K100 Air are extremely low profile. I'll let you know about the keycaps and switches in more detail in a bit, but looking at the design of them specifically, they're very, very slim. They look very similar to those found on a laptop keyboard. Now I personally like them, but I can appreciate they're not going to be to everybody's tastes. You will find all the standard keys you'd expect to find on a full-sized keyboard, along with an additional 4 G keys, which can be used for macros or within Elgato's Stream Deck software with the plugin that can be added to it. The top side edge of the K100 Air contains the on-off switch, the USB-C charging port, and a small slot for storing the Slipstream wireless dongle. The corners of the board are quite sharp due to the angular design that Corsair decided to go with, so just be careful. They are pretty sharp, to be fair. The bottom of the K100 Air is made from plastic because 280 quid must not be enough for Corsair to give us a little bit more aluminium. That being said though, it does look quite nice in my opinion. It's covered almost entirely in a geometric pattern made up of loads of little triangles. Now Corsair are well known for their RGB, and the K100 Air has RGB by the bucket load. Every single key is individually lit and programmable within iCUE. The quality of the RGB is pretty good, but I was a little disappointed with the uniformity on some of the keys. The left control key on my review unit has some noticeable patchiness. And due to it having north-facing LEDs, the keys that contain multiple legends have a gradient to the lighting, and I'm guessing this was done intentionally, but the legends for the secondary function on some of the keys are in different positions to some of the other keys, leading to differing brightness levels. Now I am nitpicking slightly with that last point, but I wanted to give you guys a thorough rundown as this board costs as much as a budget GPU. As with pretty much all newer Corsair RGB products, there are a wide variety of lighting presets available within iCUE, and the transitions between colours are silky smooth and fluid. So if you're about to drop £280 on a keyboard, you want it to last a long time. So let's talk about the build quality of the K100 Air Wireless. As I mentioned earlier, the majority of the backplate is made from anodized brushed aluminium. It's high quality metal which feels really premium and is slightly cold to the touch. Now, just like every other low profile keyboard that I've ever checked out, the K100 Air Wireless does have a little bit of flex to the body, but it's nothing to be overly concerned about in my opinion, and it flexes a lot less than the Deathstalker V2 Pro I checked out on the channel a while back. The buttons across the top of the K100 are made from what feels like the same plastic as the main keycaps. They have a slight tactile click when you press them, but they do also feel a little spongy at the same time. The scroll wheel though, on the other hand, that feels very solid. It's metal, and just like the backplate, feels kind of cold to the touch. It doesn't have any steps when you scroll it, and it's really smooth. It's got a really grippy textured pattern, and it feels much better quality than the buttons that I just mentioned. And one thing I do have to mention here is the feet found on the bottom of the K100 Air Wireless. They feel really cheap and tacky, and they don't feel any different to the feet you'd find on budget gaming keyboards. But overall, the build quality, I can only say it's okay. In Corsair's defense, there's only so much that you can do to deliver a rigid body in a keyboard that's 17mm thick without it weighing a ton. There are areas where I think things could have been done a little bit better though. The spongy buttons and the plastic feet and bottom plate, for example. So let's talk about the switches, the keycaps, and the typing experience. The K100 Air Wireless uses Cherry MX ultra low profile tactile switches, and they feel amazing to type on. I scripted this whole video using this keyboard, and it really was a very satisfying and comfortable typing experience. The switches actuate at just 0.8mm, so they feel nice and fast, and the tactile feedback feels really satisfying. Now, talking about the keycaps, there was a concerning lack of information regarding the keycaps online. I was able to confirm with Corsair that they can be removed, but only for repair purposes, and the process was fairly in-depth and requires specific tools. I was even asked not to remove the keycaps for the purpose of this review, as it could cause damage to the switches. Now, that's all well and good that it could cause damage to the switches. I can understand why they didn't want me to remove them, but it generally just doesn't sit well with me at all. Similar to Apple's RepairGate, we're essentially at the mercy of the manufacturer when it comes to replacing broken keys or worn keycaps. Now, don't get me wrong, I've personally dealt with Corsair for my own products in the past, and they've always provided me with excellent customer service. But from the perspective of a consumer myself, being able to repair and replace stuff easily is something that I always like to see. As I mentioned the switches and the keycaps, here's a quick sound test so you can hear these switches in action and hear what the K100 Air Wireless sounds like. Now, overall, I feel that the K100 Air has a very unique sound. The majority of the keys sound okay, but the spacebar, just like the K70 Pro Mini Wireless that I checked out, the spacebar sounds dreadful, especially as this board costs so much. It rattles a lot and it sounds quite cheap. For gaming, the K100 Air felt really great to use. Granted, it did take me a little bit to get used to the ultra thin design, but once I'd used it for a couple of hours, I had no problems getting killed by everyone in Battlefield 2042 like usual. Key presses were always registered and the board felt fast and smooth, not like my skills. I tested gaming with the board connected with the wire and with the wireless dongle, and both of them felt great. And speaking of connectivity, just like the K70 Pro Mini Wireless I checked out a few months ago, the K100 Air Wireless has a multitude of connectivity options, which also dictate the level of the polling rate that you can select. If you choose to go wired, then you'll be able to crank the polling rate up to 8000 Hz. This does use a little bit of CPU resource though, so if you've got an older machine, don't go too crazy. And this keyboard also features Corsair's AXON technology, which basically means that there's a chip inside the keyboard which internally scans for key presses at a rate of 4000 Hz or 4000 times per second, regardless of what polling rate you select. So the polling rate and the AXON combined make the wired experience on this keyboard about as fast as it can be. Now the board can also be connected using the Slipstream wireless dongle to your PC, obviously without any cables. The polling rate is limited to a maximum of 1000 Hz when using it in this way, which is by no means slow, and in reality the difference for an average gamer like me is only barely noticeable. But if you do play any sort of game competitively, or you take your gaming a bit seriously, you'll want to use the cable. And finally, there's the option to connect the keyboard via Bluetooth, which is always a last resort for me when using a PC. It's slower, it's got a lot more input lag, and it's just generally worse than the other options that are available. Unless you're using a mobile or tablet where you've got no choice but to use Bluetooth, I'd always advise against it. That being said, it is nice to see it as an option, and it could come in useful for connecting the board to multiple devices and then quickly switching from one to another. There are 3 profiles which can be switched to and from using a quick press of the function and G2 to G4 keys. But obviously if you choose to go down the wireless route, you're going to be at the mercy of the battery found inside this keyboard. But that's not really a big deal, as I found the battery life to be really good during my testing. And Corsair claim that the battery life can last up to 50 hours on a single charge with the RGB active, or up to 200 hours on a single charge if you go lights out. I always take battery claims with a little bit of a pinch of salt, as batteries degrade over time and they lose a lot of their as new capacity. But from my short time with the K100 Air, I can confidently say that I've found the battery life to be excellent. The board arrived with me a little late for this review. I've only had it 5 days before this video going live, and I've never been forced to charge it once. So let's talk about software. You might have heard me say it before, but I'm going to say it again. Bad software ruins great hardware. And I'm pleased to say that's not the case with Corsair's products. Their iCUE software is probably my favourite out of all the peripheral management programs that I've used. The UI is clean and simple. The installation and uninstallation process is straightforward, and iCUE is just generally pretty good all round. If you've used any of Corsair's products before, then you're probably going to be familiar with it already. And if you haven't, you'll be setting up your RGB, creating macros and reassigning your keys in no time. The RGB options are pretty extensive within iCUE, with a decent amount of presets, and then the option to create layer upon layer of per key customized effects if you want to. You can go as in-depth as you want and create something truly unique if that's your thing. Everything is just easy to find in iCUE. Jump into the device settings for this keyboard specifically, and you can change the polling rate that I mentioned earlier, along with changing sleep mode settings, updating the firmware, and saving all of your customization to one of the onboard memory profiles. And Corsair have added some basic Stream Deck functionality. They do own Elgato after all. There are only 4 options available currently. You can link macros to Stream Deck buttons, for example, which is a nice touch, but it's something that you could already do and just set up directly in the Stream Deck software anyway. But if they continue to flesh out this integration, following the same direction as Elgato's software, then I can see this becoming something really useful. Could we see a Stream Deck built into a keyboard in the future? That would be pretty cool. Overall, iCUE is great, and it's only going to get better as they add more and more features. I've never had any major issues with it, and it's always performed and done the job. So then, we've come to the end of the video, and it's time for me to give you my final thoughts and whether I recommend the eye-wateringly expensive Corsair K100 Air Wireless. It's an absolutely gorgeous keyboard. The design is just beautiful. It's almost ridiculous how thin it is. You just have to see it to really appreciate how slim this keyboard is. And the typing experience is one of the most comfortable I've come across ever. Typing on this keyboard is fluid and satisfying. The build quality is only average. I would have loved to have seen some metal used in place of the plastic for the buttons, and some more robust feet wouldn't have gone amiss either. Probably the biggest issue for me though, and I'm sure it will be for many others, is the kind of uncertainty and long-winded process of potentially replacing keycaps and switches. That's even if it's possible for everyday users to do. Being able to repair our tech at home is a big deal for me and for the environment. It helps keep the cost for consumers down and reduce e-waste, with both of which are massive issues at the minute. Now, I just can't help but feel astonished at the price of this keyboard. It firmly sits in the high-end enthusiast level. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. If you can justify the cost and you love Corsair's products, which many people do, then you'll definitely want to check this out, as this is the most premium keyboard you're going to get from Corsair, to be fair. But if you're on any sort of a budget for your peripherals, then I'd maybe suggest toning it down a little bit and looking at something lower down in the Corsair range if you're after a Corsair board. But if you want the best of what Corsair have got to offer in a premium, mechanical, low-profile gaming keyboard, this is it. So that's the end of the video, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like down below if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to Kit Guru to keep up with the latest PC gaming news and reviews. There'll be a link in the description to check out our merch if you want to check out that, like this t-shirt I have been wearing. Anyway, guys, I've been Matt. This has been the ridiculously thin and beautiful Corsair K100 Air Wireless keyboard. I will speak to you in the next one. Look after yourselves. See you later.